The Connecticut Music Oral History Podcast is a deep dive interview series with musicians, artists, conduits, collectors, and dedicated fans, focusing on 20th century Connecticut music history. This project preserves narratives, heralds unsung movers and shakers, and defines Connecticut's influential role in cultural history. I'm your host, Brendan Toller. I'm an artist, a musician, a filmmaker, and marketing manager of the incredible Verso Studios at the Westport Library, where this very podcast is being produced. Verso Studios is a media resource and production hub, serving as an inclusive, empowered, future-forward cultural and learning center. A library branch of the 21st century, Verso Studios provides programming, commercial services, as well as educational and content creation opportunities. We have a state-of-the-art hybrid analog recording studio designed in part by Rob Fraboni, the same guy who built Keith Richards' home studio down the road. We record bands, artists, audiobooks, podcasts, and everything in between. We have video production suites, classes, and events. Check us out at the Verso Studios website and on social media. I'm very excited to have my pal Frank Critelli on the Connecticut Music Oral History Podcast. Frank Critelli writes songs and often performs live, many times solo and sometimes accompanied by one or more musical co-conspirators. For over 30 years, Frank's played in streets and subways, clubs and coffeehouses, barrooms, classrooms, colleges, festivals, theaters, and in his kitchen. Frank Critelli is the co-host of the local band show on 99.1 FM, WPLR-New Haven, and CygnusRadio.com with Rick Allison. Let's hear the first real song Frank ever wrote from his 1991 cassette, re-recorded in 2000. This is Frank Critelli with Picture.
And see a stranger looking at a picture, feeling older, sensing danger. Picture, if you will, the sleeping sands and a rainbow. Picture all the universe while turning your kaleidoscope. Picture the changes that you've gone through and will go through. Picture the music and the song you call yourself. Picture yourself much older, silver gray. Picture your life somewhere far, far away. Picture your children and their children. And then there's picture what their life would be if no one ever cared. Picture all these things leveled for a shopping mall. Picture a village and then a town, now a city. Tell me which of these would you rather make your home? And picture yourself in a boat on a river with tangerine trees, marmalade skies. Somebody calls you, you answer quite slowly. A girl with kaleidoscope eyes. looking at a picture. Is it me there on the beach? Looking at a picture of myself and see a stranger. Looking at a picture, feeling old, sensing danger. Sensing danger. Feeling older.
Loud enough for you?
Oh, yeah, perfect.
All right, comfortable?
Yeah. It's a nice room.
Yeah, we're in the Verso Studios SSL control room. So, yeah, I'm here with Frank Critelli, and yeah, we'll just get started. So I guess first question would be, where did you grow up? What was your childhood like? And how did music come into the picture?
I grew up in Levittown, New York. I'm the child of, a single parent family. I was abandoned by my father when I was 5. And I think that music for me was something that always felt like it was there. I sang songs at a very early age that I made up. I was a stutterer as a child, and I remember seeing Mel Tillis on TV. It might have been the show Hee Haw. And he was a wicked stutterer. He was like Porky Pig. And he sang a song and he didn't stutter. And I looked at my mom and I'm like, what happened? And she's like, well, you don't stutter when you sing, So I started to sing to myself, and kind of, I still stammer over my words every now and then. Sometimes people pick it up, or when I get nervous or anxious, I tend to stutter. But singing for me was a way to not stutter. And like those guys like when I was growing up, like, Hee Haw was a musical show for me, or the Sonny and Cher show, or Tony and Lando and Dawn, or even on Saturday morning television, it was like the Hudson Brothers Razzle Dazzle Hour. So I just felt like I was always surrounded by music on TV,
Mm-hmm.
And was immediately attracted to it.
What music was grabbing you then, though?
That stuff as a little kid, but I got to say that there were 2 events that really sort of pushed me in the right direction. When I was a kid, around 7 or 8, I used to do like little odd jobs around the neighborhood, And the guy diagonally across the street from us was Mr. Holmes, who was putting out a bunch of stuff to special pickup from his garage. So I would take the stuff out of the garage and put it on the curb. That was the job for today, And he's like, you can take any of that junk, you know what I mean? And he had a bunch of records in milk crates. So I took a bunch of his records, And the one that I remember the best was Meet the Beatles, because it was just those floating heads on the record sleeve, And I was like, wow, and Lennon's Chubby Cheeks at that time, And I just remember that record particularly, that meant a lot to me. And the first record I ever bought, I was around the same time, probably with money that I made from Mr. Holmes, at Times Square store on Jerusalem Avenue. It was Hempstead Turnpike in Levittown, New York. And they had a record store in this, department store. So I would go to the record store while my mom was in the grocery store. And I picked out a 45, and it was Johnny Be Good by Chuck Berry, which, of course, is older than me, but I picked it up. And I brought it over, and the hippie behind the counter is like, oh, man, you got some Chuck Berry there, little man, He goes, you got a spider? And I didn't know what he was talking about, He's like, you need something to go in the hole so you can put it on the turntable, And he's like, I'll throw one in the bag for you, And I remember I took it home and I played it ad nauseum. I probably played it 75 times in a row, And my mother said, why did you buy that record? And I said, I didn't know, And she said, your father used to sing that to you in the womb.
Whoa.
Yeah, that's what I said.
So you had that kind of... I've had
Maybe.
that...
I don't really know,
Happened once to me when it was like this random thing that I ended up seeing Stevie Wonder, and I was like crying, and I was like, why are you crying? And it was definitely because I know my parents were listening to that music during their courtship, and then,
it somehow registered.
Yeah.
Imagine?
Yeah.
That's what music does, It registers with people. I don't, maybe it's because of the circles we run in, like we said before, but I don't know anybody who's not turned on by some sort of music. It's a universal language, And for me, it was, it hit me like a fist really early in my life.
Mm-hmm. So I realize it comes to people, and it's redefined at different points in your life. But when did that sort of like, oh, this is what I'm going to do, or at least I'm going to be a lifer at this? When did that come into play? Or even maybe a guitar came in or some more sort of instrument.
Just about immediately, I used to imagine myself and fantasize that I was Tony Orlando, because I had a total crush on Dawn, both of them. And, so I imagined myself as that guy. As I got a little bit older, there was more poetry in the back of my math notebook than there were math problems, So I think I come to music from a very lyrical place. And I picked up the guitar just as a vehicle for me to sing my words, because I would sing to myself all the time anyway. You know what I mean? I would sing the stuff that I put in my notebook. I had melodies for it, And when I figured out some chords on the guitar, because my friend Tim O'Connor played in a high school band, so I picked it up little bit by little bit just so that I could sing words.
Wow. And what age was that? Yeah.
Well, early high school, maybe
Right.
12, 13, 14, something like that.
So would you say like you're kind of self-taught? Or...
I've never taken a music lesson in my life. And that's a shame because I'm not really that great of a guitar player, I'm a strummer. I can hold a rhythm. I got a steady right hand, but I'm not, flashy like some of those guys are, like Jim Croce. He's got chops. Like people have chops. I don't really have chops. I'm just a strummer.
What artists were like a big influence on you in terms of, your style and approach, you think? I mean, and that could be writers, it could be poets, and anything,
Well, I remember riding my bicycle to a used record store called Titus Oaks, which was in the neighboring town, and I picked up the first Cat Stevens record. When he turned folky, was Monobone Jakin', and it had this garbage can on the cover that was spitting, and I was attracted to the picture on the cover. And when I took it home, I had no idea what the music was like. And when I took it home, it was this acoustic singer-songwritery type of stuff, and it was just one guy. It wasn't the Beatles or the Rolling Stones. It was Cat Stevens, that guy. And I'm like, he doesn't really need anybody to do his songs. I mean, I didn't have anybody to do my songs, and I just wanted to do that. So probably that record kind of pushed me into a more singer-songwriter sort of pursuit.
Well, and it's self-reliant. You don't need to rely on other musicians to.
Well, that's the truth. Like I never really had until much later in life. I never really had anybody that I felt comfortable with saying, "Well, you want to play drums on my songs?" But once you get to be a little bit older and you find yourself in those circles, then there's other people who want to jam.
When did you discover sort of live and local music?
When I was in college, I used to play at the bottom of my bed, you know what I mean? And my college roommate was Mike Banks, and he was doing this fundraising thing for the Haiti Project, which was like a group of students from North Adams State College, which is now Mass College of Liberal Arts in North Adams, Mass. He was raising money for this, and he's like, "Let's do a coffee house. You could sing." I'm like, "Yeah, sure," But I didn't really think he was serious. I didn't think it would ever come to fruition until I saw a bunch of signs around campus with a date and everything like that, So that was my first, my first experience singing singing some of my songs in a bunch of covers in front of a bunch of people, And it was right then where I knew that A, I was an applause whore, and B, like I feel comfortable here. Like this is me. Like this feels like me. I put it on like a pair of shoes and it fit just fine, And after college, I moved to Cambridge, Mass, and I immediately started playing on the street. And it was like, a fraternity and sorority all rolled into one, The minute you were walking around in Harvard Square with a guitar, you'd see other people and they'd wink at you, like they'd give you the half wave, like because you were in, the brother and sisterhood, And that was really my first taste of, I guess, sort of like your baptism by fire, Singing in front of an appreciative audience is one thing. singing in a train station or on the street with passersby and stuff, and trying to get an audience that way is a little bit tougher. But for a long time, and maybe even still, trains would go by. I mean, I could sing a song through anything. I didn't even have to necessarily hear myself to be able to know exactly where I was in the song and remain relatively on key and stuff like that.
Yeah. What parts of it do you think motivate you? Is it the process? Is it the songwriting? Is it a little bit the adoration? Is it getting to the gig? Is it everything?
It's everything, but for me, it's really the writing process. I think I have the most fun writing songs, especially now, I'm writing with some other people now. I write with The Bargain and Muddy Rivers and Shandy Lawson. And sitting around my kitchen table and writing songs with these fellows has been the most satisfying and enlightening and challenging and wonderful experience I've had in writing songs. Before this, for the most part, I did it in isolation. I did it by myself at the same kitchen table, but I did it by myself, And now we have pizza and beer and whiskey, and we pass a joint around, and there's a brotherhood involved in it. And I feel like I'm writing the best stuff of my life in collaboration with these guys, So it was always the writing for me. When I stood in front of an audience, there's that, like I always felt like, I don't know if it's a forced charm or if it's acting. I guess there's a certain amount of theater when you host something, Hey, everybody, like, you have to, you're the hype man, you got to get people involved and stuff like that. And I always felt comfortable in that role. So that part of it came natural to me as well. But the writing is my favorite.
Yeah. When did Connecticut come into the picture?
After a couple of years of street performing in Cambridge and doing a bunch of gigs and getting some opening acts and playing some decent clubs, I got afraid. I got afraid. I looked at people who were doing the same thing that I was doing, but 25 years down the line.
And what did that look like?
Looked like missing teeth and no health care. And I mean, I ate in a soup kitchen every now and then, and I saw those guys eating in the same soup kitchen, and I was like, that's a long time to have a rough life, So I came to Connecticut to go to graduate school, which I went to Quinnipiac College. It's a university now, but most of those buildings were piles of dirt when I was there. And I got a teaching degree, which I guess is the same idea. I used to tell my musical friends, yeah, I'm a teacher, but I do 5 shows a day for a captive audience,
That's right.
The performance aspect of being an English teacher came naturally to me as well.
And do you think that helped your process? I mean, you're teaching literature every day, right? And writing.
Yeah. Yeah. I think one feeds off of the next,
Right.
It's a slightly different hat, but they're similar, and talking about literature all day and being surrounded by youthful energy really worked for me for a long time.
So when you're in Connecticut, who are you checking out? What clubs are you going to? What's the scene like? All that.
The first name I saw, I got here around 91, give or take.
Yeah.
And the first name I saw in the New Haven Advocate was James Velvet. And I saw it all the time. And I was like, that guy's got it going on. Like, I want to be like that guy. So I went to see him play a bunch. My first gig in Connecticut was at Christopher Martin's, as a solo guy. Now, I gave him the cassette that I made. I had a 10-song cassette when I was in Cambridge. And they knew what I did, and it was the worst show ever. I mean, it sucked. I was terrible. Everybody hated me. It was the worst ever, I felt bad taking their money. I took their money, but I felt bad doing it. And I just kind of put it down for like 6 months, And then I walked into the Daily Cafe on Elm Street. It's now a taco joint with a stupid name. I think, Yale Taco or something dumb.
So it was on Broadway, kind of?
Yeah, kind of across from where X and O is now.
Okay.
Right by that little park where you come out. If you make a right out of 3 sheets and you go to the next corner,
Yeah.
then that next light, the Daily
Okay.
Cafe was right
Yeah.
there. And a duo was playing at the Daily Cafe named Quay and O'Connor. And I had opened up for them in Cambridge at Club Passim on Palmer Street. It's a classic club, And I walked in with my cassette, and Steve Shapiro was behind, the counter. And I said, hi, Quayne O'Connor are playing here next week. This is my stuff. I'd like to open for them. And he goes, who are you? I said, my name is Frank. And he goes, who's Quayne O'Connor? I'm like, just let me open, He let me open, and it was a totally different story than Christopher Martin's. I had found like my little niche, and I wound up booking a series there for 2 years.
Wow.
It was a Thursday series, and we had a bunch of music come through there. We had some great shows.
Was it the first time you were booking shows, or you'd been
First
doing
time
that?
ever booking shows.
And what's that like? I think people. I mean, I've been on every sort of aspect of it because I think if you're that involved, it's inevitable. Like you're headed for that iceberg. Like if you're really involved in local music and you have a local band, obviously you have a local band, but if you're a real fan, you get into it at all levels. So what's that like, booking shows?
It's a nightmare, a beautiful nightmare, But that's not true for everybody. It's true for guys like you and me. And I've always respected people who not only took from the scene as an artist, but also provided other artists with an opportunity to share their art. And that's what James Velvet did. He had he booked a lot of series as well. One of his better ones, and my favorite one, was called Maximum Minstrels, which was on Coffee with a K on Audubon Street. And it was really great, And I always wanted to do that sort of stuff.
What was great about it? What do you just pair with people? Ooh, hold on, let me fix that.
The lights went out.
Yeah, we're that still.
Oh my goodness. Oh, yeah, you just got to kick your feet a little. I'll do that every now and then. I'll kick my feet up.
Yeah.
It was a real listening audience, and it was focused on the songwriter, and it was an original series, And it was great. A bunch of people all sitting in chairs, drinking coffee, faced in your direction, and you got to talk to them and sing songs for them, and they would clap at the end. Mm-hmm. And that was what it was all about for me.
Yeah. How would you describe, James Velvet's music and then him as a person, I guess?
He was the king of the strum and sing scene when I was around here, and for a really long time. Decades, He knew everybody, and everybody loved him.
What did he have a day job or anything like that?
I don't know.
Yeah. You don't know?
No,
you of
not
all
really.
people don't know.
Well, he did odd jobs. I think he worked for Best Video for a while. Like a lot of local musicians, like Jed Parrish from the Gravel Pit worked at Best Video. So did Hank Hoffman, owns it now, So he worked there, and there was a drop box, I remember, on the Yale campus where people could rent a video and then put it in a mailbox. So he'd go and pick up the videos and bring them back to the video store, stuff like that. But I think, he did radio. He did the local band show with Rick Allison. I'm sure he made a little bit of money from that. But other than that, I'm not really sure what he did during the day. Maybe walk the dog.
So he was devoted.
Yeah, he was a lifer, a total lifer.
Was he really prolific? It seemed like he was.
Yes. He might have told you a different story about his songwriting process. And I'm sure there were ebbs and flows, like in anybody's creativity, But he always seemed prolific to me. And his songs were deceptively complex. To listen to them, they sound simple, and you're like, I could play that, until you try to sit down and figure it out. And then you're like, holy cow, like, what is that chord? Like F demented or something, F demented suspended, fourth, He was really interesting, and he had a really interesting rhythm. And I just loved him.
I've always been averse to those money chords, but that's what makes the magic happen.
Maybe.
Yeah.
Maybe. Doesn't Lou Reed talk about the secret chord and, and something else? Or even Leonard Cohen talks about the secret chord.
Yeah. So many people describe James Velvet as a mentor, and was that something that, like, it was an obvious thing that he was doing, or you had no idea? Or, sometimes I think people, like, you know that they're trying to steer you in a certain direction, they're trying to impart wisdom, but other people, I think it's just like, yeah, you're hanging out with me, and I'm having a good time hanging out with you, and maybe I'm imparting some stuff on you, but we're just friends and we're hanging out.
That's what it was like with James. If he imparted anything, I don't think he did it on purpose. Everybody looked up to him, and not because he was 6'6",
He was 6'6".
He was big man. He was a big man.
Yeah.
When he walked into a room, you felt his presence. Like, even if you weren't looking in that direction, you felt like something happened. There's a disturbance in the force. Oh, James Velvet came in, you know. He was a big guy, and he was just special. Like, he was one of those special people, you know. Like, you've seen those people, you know. And I've described this to, you know, to others, you know. Like, you're one of those people. Like, Picasso would have painted you, you know. You know, if this was, you know, in the olden days, they put a halo around your head because you just shine, you know, and that's what James Velvet was like.
Yeah, I mean, when he had passed, reading all the tributes to him, it was just so clear that he was just a real pillar for a lot of songwriters in the scene, and he instilled confidence in so many people.
Yeah,
it was very giving. Yeah.
Well, you know, like I said, you know, he provided opportunities for other people to share their art. So he was inspiring in that way. You know, his output was very inspiring. He did great shows. He had, the Mockingbirds was his band for a long time. And they had a 12-year residency the last Saturday of every month at Cafe 9. And they played on the floor up against the brick wall, you know. There used to be tables there, but there was a bench that, you know, you could... it was on a latch, and it would kind of swing down up against the wall, and he'd be right there on the floor, and people would be standing 3 feet in front of him, you know, a lot of people too, and they were smoking hot, you know, and because they had that one gig every month, you know, and they always had something to rehearse for, and they got so tight and so great that it was just a knockdown, drag-out party once a month.
Mm-hmm. So you're booking shows. When does you record stuff at some point? Yeah.
I hung around here for a little while, and then I visited a couple of studios because, you know, everybody had records, and I had put out 2 cassettes when I was living in Cambridge because that's what everybody did then. You know, they put out cassettes. By 1996, around when I was, you know. My record came out in 96, but in the year and a half before that, I was looking around for different studios to record a record, and I came upon a Reservoir recording studio, which was in Building H on Treadwell Street in Hamden, Connecticut, and it's now the Cellar on Treadwell. There was a recording studio in there, and if I'm not mistaken, Travis worked there way back in the day, and I walked in, and I met Roger Arnold. And he was the engineer there, and we hit it off right away. And Norman Cross was the guy who owned the studio. He has since died. And we recorded a record together of his poetry and some of his songs and stuff. And he was an amazing artist, you know. And there was this giant mural painted on the wall. So when I walked in, it was just like a punch of color, you know. So I'm like, oh, this is an artist's place. I'm like, I want to hang around here, you know. And I'm like, wow, you know, and I'm talking to Norman. I'm like, who did this, you know? And he's like, oh, you know, that's my work. You know, here I am over here in the corner. And I look down, and there he is. Yeah, that's you. All right, you know. He painted his self-portrait in the corner of this giant mural in the studio. So I recorded the record there, 12 songs, and it was called 2 in the Afternoon, which was a line from the Sphinx riddle about what walks on 4 legs in the morning, 2 in the afternoon, and 3 legs at night.
And were you proud of it? So, like, sometimes the first record, you're like, oh man, my voice, or
you know, and I know, and everybody who records music knows that in hindsight, you hate everything, or at least you see the flaws, and you think, I could have sung that better. Why didn't anybody tell me that harmony was off? That's a bad chord. You know, there's a buzz here or there. But I am proud of the songs. Sometimes even through a mediocre performance, I feel like you can see the worth of a song, you know. So I always thought that my songs were okay, you know. Like, I was happy to be able to write them and thankful to be able to write them. So even though my performance may be limited, you know, I like the songs. So yeah, I was proud, and in hindsight, embarrassed.
And was it, you make a CD of it, or
yeah,
and then did people do, like, what do you do to promote it then? It's a lot of...
hit the road. Back then there was no we didn't have the internet, so like you'd send a bunch out to booking agents, and then you'd have to call them at Wednesday afternoon between 1 and 1:20, to try to catch them on the phone to get a gig there, and it cost $1 bazillion in postal fee and everything else to get gigs, but that's how you did it, And in the circles that I ran in, I could still do gigs in Cambridge. I could still go back there and do gigs there, and the folky circles that I ran in, they liked it, and that was the one CD that I sold the most copies of. I sold 5,000 copies of that record, which for an independent artist was kind of cool, like for me it was cool.
But was that go time for you? Was that like, I'm going to make it as a musician kind of thing?
No, 5,000 copies over the span of 4 years or 5 years.
That's still a lot.
It's a little different than if you sell 5,000 copies in 6 months, you know what I mean? And there were a lot of other people doing a lot more cool things than I was doing, Like a lot of the people that I came up with doing open mics in Cambridge were Dar Williams, Vance Gilbert, Ellis Paul, and all of those guys made it to a much higher level than I did, And like I said, I got scared. I went back to school. I had, my attention was split, you know what I mean? I didn't give myself to it fully. And if I have any regrets in music, it's that, I didn't go all in.
That you could have stuck it out long enough or something like that. Yeah.
Maybe, I don't really know, Like I never really had anybody who believed in my music anybody of influence who believed in my music as much as I believed in my music. And in order to, quote unquote, make it, whatever the hell that means, you need somebody with money who thinks that they can make money off of you. And no one ever thought that about me.
Yeah, wow. I mean, I've never, as you know, my music is kind of just like we're just doing it for fun, right? And we're doing it for the local thing that we love so much.
Yeah, but you know what? If I know now, like if I ever made it in music, I would have totally been a manager, and I would have invested in a lot of people, and I could probably give you a dozen names that I would say, yeah, I'd take a chance on that guy. And Dust Hat's one of those names. You're all good looking. You write smoking hot songs. You have fashion sense. You got the sex. You got the smile. You got the style. And Dust Hat's they're a great band. Not everybody can play the roof of Cafe 9 and, blow the roof off the roof. I don't know,
That's enough about me, or our band. But, well, I mean, we're jumping ahead here, but yeah, like who inspires you now? I mean, the things that you say about Max Omer, and I would say the same. It's just,
oh my God,
guy's unbelievable.
That guy's unbelievable. He's unbelievable. He's the Clash, I'm inspired by young people coming up and doing the same thing. When I taught high school, I could have picked out the kids that, when I thought in my mind, like, of that guy right there, in 10 years, we're going to be hanging out in the same bars. He's going to be playing in a local band. And I was right across the board. Like recognizes like. So a few years ago, it seemed like a bunch of people came to town to go to school. They all went to, University of New Haven or Southern, like Sam Carlson or Mike Voice or Walker, de Trollmaison, however you say that last name. And all these really creative people came into town. They all had Roger Arnold as an engineering professor at University of New Haven. And to see, people who are 24 and not 54 coming up and writing great songs and, kicking out the jams, and that absolutely lights me up, One of my favorite bands on the scene right now is Brother Beauty, and that's Bobby Dykeman from Wolf Harbor, Jeremy Cooney, who was doing solo stuff, and this other guy, Rob Galvin, who I don't know as well, but 3 songwriters who got together and made this band. And they played the Sunday Buzz at Cafe 9 last Sunday. And to me, they're like the band, rough and tumble, raggedy harmonies, great songs, and to see these, I'll say these kids, doing great things lights me up, and says, yeah, we're all here in the Connecticut music scene, we're all part of this very long continuum, you know? And I've never felt more connected to a community than I have in the Connecticut music scene, you know?
I feel the same way.
Yeah. I think everybody does in a lot of ways. You know, it's not a competition thing. You know, like, oh shit, that guy shouldn't have that gig. It's not like that. You know, it's all like, oh man, I'm going to see, you know, Brendan Toller's band over there, or I'm going to see Wolf Harbor over here, you know? It's a real supportive scene and people who really appreciate art and music, you know? And
Intergenerational too, I think is key. Because in other main cities, I feel like you fall into I'm a 25-year-old punk, or I'm, you know, the cliques.
Right,
so,
right.
Yeah.
And although there's different genres and like maybe certain clubs sort of cater to certain styles of music, and maybe there are cliques, even the cliques get along.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like there's no infighting or anything like that. You know, and that's inspiring too.
Yeah. So in the 90s, what are the clubs in New Haven?
Rudy's, where Three Sheets is now. Rudy's was a great club. Toad's Place back in the day was unbelievable. I know it leaves a little bit to be desired now, but that book about Toad's Place is coming out, and it's really where the legends did play. And they gave locals such a chance to open up for the big names. And I got so many gigs at Toad's Place because every folk, like for a couple of years in there, every folkie that came through, I got to open for.
Who?
Arlo Guthrie, Joan Baez, Richard Thompson, Steve Forbert. And I'm like those guys are huge, you know? And I have an Arlo Guthrie story. Joan Baez kissed me right here, you know? And I would have never had that opportunity if it wasn't for clubs in the greater New Haven area and Connecticut that gave locals a chance, you know? And that was really, really instrumental and important because I would have never had a chance to play in front of an audience of 800, you know, other than opening for Arlo Guthrie. And, you know, his audience, they're like, oh, look, this chubby little folky kid, you know, who knows what's maybe in 25 years, he'll be just like Arlo, you know, and they really gave you a chance and they listened to you. And it was great, you know, it was really great.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's something that clearly was instilled into you either by the folk scene or by James. I mean, an amalgamation of things, right? But like, what is it about presenting somebody or turning other people on to a new artist what do you like about it?
Well, like I said, you know, music speaks to people and it's a connection between us. So if you and I are, you know, sitting at the sushi place and I'm like, oh, Brendan, I heard this great band, you got to hear him. And you're like, holy cow, you're right, you know, and you want to go out and buy everything that they ever wrote, you know. That used to happen to me at Exile on Main Street. It's in Branford, but they had a satellite office in Hamden for a little while. Jeffrey Thunders worked there and Dean Falcone worked there. And I remember walking in around 96, 95, 96, somewhere around there, and hearing this stuff. And I'm like, Dean, who is this? And he's like, oh, Elliott Smith, you know? So I'm like, where are his records, you know? And there was like 3 or 4, just like EP kind of things. And I bought them all, you know, because you heard it in the record store. Or like Cutler's on, you know, whatever street that is, College Street or Elm Street or whatever it is. You used to have listening stations, and there were 25 of them. And you could walk around, you could put the headphones on and skip through the CD to test it out in the record store before you bought it, you know? And it was always at least 18 of the 25 listening stations had bands that I never even heard of, you know? So that was really inspiring and turning people on to new music, saying, I really like this and I think you're going to like it too, you know? And when they do, and go on, and years later, and they're like, you know, I've had people say, you know, you turned me on to John Prine. I would have never heard of John Prine if it wasn't for you. And I'd be like, oh, well, you know what? That makes me really happy. Mm-hmm. You know, I'm glad I turned you on to John Prine. Everybody should know John Prine. Mm-hmm. You know. So
you got the first record, and then what happens?
You know, I do a bunch of gigs, drive around a little bit. I could never really make touring break even for me, you know, so I've had small touring experience, you know, but, you know, the only way I could make it even come close to break even was be to just couch surf the whole way, you know. So that sort of limited you as to where, you know, you were playing gigs because you had to know somebody in the area.
My favorite part of that Coen Brothers movie, David Van Ronk, was when he like stares at the couch repeatedly.
Yeah.
And I was like, man, I know it all too well.
Yeah. Yeah. And I've stayed in people's houses that I didn't even know, you know, on a cross country trip one time. I've played in a lot of states on the street, you know. I think it was maybe 94 or 95. I went on a cross country trip. And I remember I was in New Orleans and I was playing on the street. And this guy comes walking by and he's like, "Oh, do you know any Talking Heads?" You know, I'm like, "Yeah, I know some Talking Heads." And I played a Talking Heads song. And then his wife came up and we all started chatting. I wound up spending the night at their house. I slept with their dog on their living room floor, you know. And we ate crawfish at their kitchen table and stuff. And just playing around and, you know, meeting different people and stuff. It was always really, really cool.
Did you form a band at some point? You've played with people over the years.
Oh yeah. In I guess around 98 or 97 or something like that. Me and a guy I knew named Chris Scally, we started to write some songs together, and we started a band called 404, which was named after the computer glitch. And we wrote some songs and we played some cool gigs. You know, we got to play CB's Gallery in New York City, and we played the Kendall Cafe in Cambridge, and that was a cool club at the time. And we never really put out a record, but we did some really great shows. You know, we opened up for the Lemonheads one time, and that was really cool.
Wow.
Yeah.
And so I'm trying to think. Obviously you started booking for more places than what was that first place called?
Daily Cafe.
Daily Cafe.
Yeah, Steve Shapiro's.
Where did it evolve from there? Because eventually you're at like Daffodil Fest, and then all this stuff snowballs to like even today.
Yeah,
right?
I never did any booking at the Daffodil Fest. That was Robbie DeRosa.
Oh, okay.
The host of Homegrown on WESU.
I'm glad we dispelled that myth. Yeah.
Yeah. But I mean, I was involved. I used to volunteer there.
Okay,
and
that's what I'm thinking of.
And
yeah.
I live in Meriden, so I always
Right.
got the gig. You know, he tried to have like 30% of the acts be from Meriden. You know, after a while, I'm like, stop booking me. You know, I felt bad about it. You know, like I'm doing it every year for 13 years in a row. You know, I booked a couple of little series here and there. One at Brood Awakening, which is now a tattoo place on Route 10 north of Quinnipiac University. And I did some booking here or there. These days, I book for the Old Church Acoustic Series, and that's on Colony Street in Meriden.
Describe that. You were describing it to me before.
It's a legacy series. It was started by Mike Wilcox, who has since passed, and he started it in Rocky Hill at the Old Stone Church. You know, and it's a traditional church coffee house. When I was coming up, kind of doing open mics, the church coffee house was the place. Every Universalist church had a monthly coffee house, and it was always well attended because it was $5 at the door, and the church got the money. So all the Universalists would come, and the ladies would be crocheting in the back, and they would have a meatloaf dinner and things like that. And this is that style of coffee house. It's a traditional church coffee house. So the calendar goes from September to May. It's 3 performers a night. Once a month, and half-hour sets, real fast, and a cheap cover, and you get to hear some people, in a really, really listening environment. Like people are, like they hang on your words, So when you're a folky songwriter type, or, you write lyrics, or, you just want to be listened to and not at a barroom with a TV over your head or something like that. Church coffee houses were the place to play. It was a place where you knew that you would be heard, and you would always sell merchandise, because guaranteed somebody would hear at least in your half-hour set, even if it was one song, man, they would buy your cassette for $5, So it was a great way to become accustomed to playing in front of an audience, a listening audience. So it turns me on to be able to provide that for other performers, who don't necessarily get a whole lot of opportunity to play for a very quiet and very appreciative listening audience.
And then there's the loud audience, Sunday Buzz.
Well, I mean, you can't in a bar room.
Well, who I should say you are the MC of, and you book that a little bit, right? Too?
I've done a lot of the booking.
Yeah.
A lot of Paul's done some. Fernando Pinto's brought some acts in for the Sunday Buzz. So there's been other people who've booked it, but I booked a whole bunch of them in the last however many years it's been going on. And in a bar, you can't tell people to be quiet. It's a bar. They're there for a beer and camaraderie and to hang out with their friends.
That's the scene, man.
And to hear a couple of tunes.
Yeah.
And all that's positive, But even at a club like Cafe 9, that's a music room before it's a bar. It's not like playing, a bar that has music.
Maybe your first gig. Yeah.
Yeah, like Christopher Martin's maybe is not necessarily, cover bands play there.
Right.
It's not necessarily a place for original music.
Yeah.
So even when people are loud at Cafe 9, it's still a music crowd.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the difference, I think.
That's right. And then, I mean, how did the local band show come about? I mean, it was like probably natural evolution, right? Because James Velvet hosted it.
James and Rick Allison hosted the local band show for...
Describe Rick Allison for our listeners.
I'll choke up a little bit because he's my benefactor. He's my mentor. He's like Sam Shepard to me, Sam Elliott, big fluffy mustache, a crazy Zen master, loves birds, like he's just an absolutely wonderful human being who doesn't take any from anybody because he doesn't have to. You know what I mean? He seems self-actualized to me. Walt Whitman used to say that I've never met a man who was truly awake. How could I look him in the face? And sometimes that's how I feel about Rick Allison. I can hardly make eye contact with the guy because he's fully awake to me,
And he's accomplished so much against what I'm going to just probably say a lot of difficult odds within the scenes that he ran in.
Well, and he's done a lot of things that people don't know about, I'm not sure if he still maintains his website, rjallison.com. But when I was growing up, I remember this because I remember the voice. And it was White Diamonds by Liz Taylor. And I remember that commercial when I was a kid. And that's the voice of Rick Allison, And I remember it. Like, it stuck in my memory, And I'm like, when I found out that was him, I'm like, that's you? He's like, yeah, Liz Taylor sent my kids to college, And I was like, hell yeah, man. I'm like, I remember that, I even as a kid, I probably imitated that voice, and he's that guy. He's that guy.
Yeah.
He'll tell you that it was all luck. He stepped in shit when he got, those first voiceover gigs. And it snowballed, until, it's holding a Gumby statue and it's got like a tie on it or something like that, maybe like a clown nose, but he's got an Emmy up there, you know what I mean? Or whatever that is.
Yeah. Yeah, wow.
So he's the real deal.
Yeah. Can you give us, when did the local band show start?
Depending on who you talk to, it's either 88 or 89. Because of certain lifestyle decisions, I don't think they know exactly when it started. But it started with James Velvet, and they had a song.
Pushing it on PLR?
No, I think that was Rick Allison who got it on PLR.
Okay.
But right. James Velvet was in a band called the New Haven Radiators, and they had this great song called, and it only had one lyric. It was, relax, take off your slacks, bam, bam, it was like a Green Onions kind of instrumental tune. And Rick Allison was like, oh man, this should totally be a theme song for a radio show, And they invented the local band show. And it's been on WPLR-New Haven since about 88 or 89.
Wow. So yeah, then how did you take on a co-host role, I guess?
When James died in 2015, they were doing a radio tribute. So the local band show did a tribute for James Velvet, and WPLR gave them an hour for it. And they got a bunch of people to, give in sound clips and stuff like that. And I was invited to Rick Allison's studio. It was me, Johnny Java, and Rick Allison. And we all talked about James. We played his music. We played the clips from people and their remembrances and stuff like that. And then after that, Rick Allison called me on the phone, and he said, "Don't answer now. Think about it. The show must go on. James would want it that way. Would you consider, co-hosting the local band show?" And he didn't get the words out of his mouth before I said, "I'm in. I'm absolutely in."
Yeah.
And it's an honor and it's a privilege, and I feel the weight of responsibility to James and Rick to do a good job. I sit in James's chair, and my notebook is on his music stand, and literally his portrait is over my shoulder. So when you walk into the studio, I feel like my friend is there. And it's a good way for me to not only remember him, but continue his legacy of supporting local bands.
Mm-hmm. And you work with Cygnus a little bit, right? Describe what that is and how it's, as much as you know.
Gary Gahn, who lives in Trumbull, a local music enthusiast and a music enthusiast in general, was a disc jockey at Cygnus Radio a long time ago. The guy who owned it died, and they were going to fold the station. And then Gary said, "Don't do anything yet," and he called like 5 of us, and we took over the bills, and we kept it going. So Cygnus Radio is now based in Connecticut. It used to be sort of based in Ohio. We have a couple of disc jockeys, like one from Chicago, one from, Austin, Texas. And we do great shows, and it's we're fully licensed and all that stuff. So we don't just play local music or unsigned acts. We can play anything we want. And we have a funk show and a poetry show. Rick Allison is kind of like our anchor store. He does a daily show from Monday to Friday. And it's been really great. It's another one of those things that I get to do in music that, lights my fire.
Mm-hmm. Were you in any, I'm only asking this question because one of those Dean Falcone tributes we did. Were you in any bands with Jim and Dean at some point? Or filled in or anything like that?
Jim, as in James Velvet?
Jim Balga.
Oh, Jim Balga.
Yeah.
No.
Okay.
However, I did play Cafe 9 one time where Dean played electric guitar for me and James played the bass.
Oh, cool.
And Johnny Java was on drums and my buddy Chris Scally was on electric guitar. So it was like a fully fleshed out folky Frank,
Yeah.
at that time.
Very cool.
Yeah.
You used to be a teacher. What advice would you impart on somebody any age who'd want to start doing music?
My advice is do it, Don't ask permission. Don't ask forgiveness. Don't pander to what you think people want to hear. Write from your heart and throw it down like you mean it.
That's right. Yeah. Am I skipping any eras or anything? Is there anything?
I don't know.
Anything you want to talk about?
Well, like we mentioned the continuum of music. You know?
Right.
Like, and all the great music that's come out of Connecticut, And every decade, even before I got here, every decade since, In the Still of the Night, there's been great music coming out of this state. And I don't think that that's by accident, Al Anderson would say it's something in the water, but or maybe it's the pizza or the beer, I'm not really sure, but this is a magical place. And, we've all complained about the scene from time to time, but it's a magical place.
As any scene has that.
Sure. But it's not New York. It's not cutthroat like New York. It's small and it's intimate and people know each other. It's real communal. And this is a special place to make music. And someday it'll happen where we'll be like, Minneapolis or Athens, Georgia, or Boston, Massachusetts, or one of those places that all of a sudden take off, you know. It's going to take one band to kick through the door and a bunch of other people will run through, you know. That's how, you know, I guess in Athens it was maybe REM, you know, that kicked through the door and made it sort like in a national sort of scene. And then the B-52s ran through and the Indigo Girls ran through and a bunch of other cool bands ran through. And that's what will happen around here. I'm still waiting for that to happen. You know, I had high hopes, and in my time it was either Miracle Legion or Mighty Purple or the Gravel Pit, you know, that I would have
all
thought.
Awesome bands.
All awesome bands that I would have thought, you know, if I was that bazillionaire, you know, I would have put my money behind any one of those bands and, you know, made them stars, you know. I would have thought it was any of those that could have, you know, made a little bit of a national splash so that the rest of us could, you know, ride the coattails. I guess.
Yeah, every time I'm like, not necessarily like depressed, but I'm thinking like, like, okay, this is it. This is the scene. Like, this is fine. It's all right. And something new just sneaks up and just totally knocks you out.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a lot more than fun.
Inspiring.
It really is inspiring.
To see people, I'm 35 now, to see people that are 22 doing it right now,
I know,
is unbelievable.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree. I totally agree. And it happens continually. You know, I don't see it stopping anytime soon.
Yeah. Yeah. Anything else?
I'm cool, man. Are you cool?
I'm great. This is amazing. Yeah.
Buddy, this is a real nice place you got sitting here. So I hope that I hope local bands take the opportunity to come down here to Westport. Imagine what else happens in Westport. You know,
that's
right. But this is a really cool joint, and you're expanding the footprint of the Connecticut music scene.
That's what we're trying to do.
You know, you're doing it.
All right, man. Thank you.
Thanks for talking to me.
Yeah. That was great.
That was my chat with Frank Critelli. You can buy his music at his Bandcamp site. Here's a brand new track to close out. Here's Frank Critelli with Muddy Rivers and Shandy Lawson in their new trio, The Bargain, playing Thursday afternoon, July 16th.
It was raining hard, I'm on the LIE on a thick and muddy summer Thursday afternoon, July 16. Driving along, trying to get back home. I got tickets to the show with my baby on a blanket in the meadow. Then what does my wandering eye see? But a flash in front of me. The one from that crazy dream. The one I hoped I'd never see. And I cried when it came to me. This is the day the music died. Thursday afternoon, July 16. Red lights hot and blue lights cold. I wonder how things happen in this world. Red lights summer and blue lights snow. I'll remember this moment when it's my turn to go.